You're listening to episode 360 of Better Than Before Breast Cancer. I'm your host, Laura Lummer. This episode is going to come out on 4th of July weekend, so July 5th. And honestly, I was just going to post an encore episode. I was going to just take the whole weekend off, not worrying about producing and editing and all of that goes on behind the podcast. And then I thought, I just can't do that because this month is just too special. And I'm so grateful and celebrating just everything that it means to be on this side of 13 years post cancer diagnosis. And this side of what has been 3.5 years now of a stage 4 diagnosis. And I'm not only celebrating that, but I want to share with you all that I kicked off this month with follow-up PET scan results. The last PET scan I had was in February, which was the first one I've ever had. And we found that there was only one lymph node in my entire body underneath and tucked inside under my right armpit there in that area. And it was the only part of my body that showed metabolic activity. Out of all the places that I had cancer, 3.5 years later, one lymph node. And the follow-up PET scan, same. Stable, one friggin' lymph node that's just hanging in there. And you know what my oncologist said to me? And this really made me think, because I think a lot about the energetics of cancer. And I've talked about that on the show before. As a part of healing, I've learned over these last years that the energetics about it are so important, meaning the emotional energetics, our mindset, our feelings, the way that we think. This brings so much energy to the body and has such a huge impact on our physical health. And so I was discussing the results of the PET scan with my oncologist, and he said, that one lymph node is just angry. The rest of your body is so quiet. Everything's at peace. But that one lymph node is hanging on to something. And as he said that to me, I thought, what does that mean to me? How does that translate to me? Is there something I can explore? Is there something I'm holding on to? Is there a residual thought or belief somewhere that I haven't yet found? Right. And when I work on that and I discover that energetic, will that support that last little tidbit of healing? So I don't know. I'm just sharing. That's where my thoughts went. But I'm super happy with the results of that PET scan. And today, actually, as I'm recording this, is the exact day, 13 years ago, July 3rd, that I rolled over in my bed, waking up, and the beginning of an extended weekend. And as my arm fell across my chest, I felt the lump in my breast, right? This is the day 13 years ago. And I sit here and I think about how much life I have experienced in 13 years. I was like bringing tears to my eyes. And I'm so grateful. And I think about the work that I get to do now, the joy that I get from it, and how much I've evolved as a person, how much I've created, which is absolutely amazing to me. And if 13 years ago, when I heard that news, when I felt that lump and has discovered it and thought, oh God, something's really wrong here, that if you would tell me this is where my life would be 13 years later, I don't know if I'd believe it because I wouldn't know how I got there, right? I just wouldn't understand. How do I get to that place? How do I get to that place 13 years later where I not only went through everything from a stage 2B diagnosis to healing, to going back to college, to getting a new degree, to starting a business, to becoming a grandma, to moving out of our family home and changing into what I call a lifestyle home for my husband and I, where we live out our dream. When I left the job of 13 years that took really good care of me and went out on my own and started my own business. And then from there evolved, went through extensive stage 4 cancer diagnosis, and still went on to study for a year and a half with Dr. Nasha Winters to become an advocate, to learn everything I've learned and get to support everyone in the way that I do. It's just fascinating when I think that diagnosis 13 years ago, finding that lump, the diagnosis didn't officially come till July 11th, but how devastating it was in that moment and how I can look back now and just see, I guess we call it a blessing in disguise, right? how much my life evolved, how many wonderful things came of it. That would have never, most likely never happened. I mean, would I be coaching breast cancer survivors if I'd never had breast cancer? I highly doubt it. That wouldn't have been anywhere on my radar. That was nowhere towards where my mindset was at. So it's just amazing to look back, to celebrate, to learn about the power that we have to support our bodies and to change our lives. And a lot of those changes are scary. They're big. When I had my stage 4 cancer diagnosis in October of 2020, and I decided to start a new membership, I decided to make a huge investment into a new life coach certification. I decided to make another huge investment into becoming a certified terrain advocate. And in order to do that, I really had to learn to believe in my ability to create the life I want and my ability to heal. I had to believe that I could do this. And sometimes that's scary. We have competing thoughts. One of the things that I had to work through a lot, and I see this often, so I want to talk about this. There's two things that I want to talk about that I think stand out a lot to me over the course of this 13 years. A lot of things stand out, but there's two I'm going to talk about on this podcast. One is competing thoughts, and the other is pushing boundaries. So when it comes to competing thoughts, I've been through this and I see this all the time. We want something, we want to create something, we want to believe something, but we hold on so much to the way we've been conditioned to believe. So we've got like one foot in the future and one foot in the past. And then we're in the middle, and it's really hard to make a concrete decision to move forward. We feel sometimes stuck, we feel sometimes conflicted, and then our mind will come up with all of these stories. I can't believe this if I move forward. Sometimes I hear this because I'll disappoint myself if it doesn't work. And I know I've certainly been through that, thinking, what if I believe I can heal and then I don't? What if I get sick or sicker? What if it spreads? And I certainly had to work through that mindset, and it was really, really strong. It took a long time because I think some beliefs are deeply rooted. And when it comes to illness, especially in our current society, in the Western belief system, and in the standard of care medicine that most of us grow up in believing in, right? There are those wonderful hippie factions whose parents raised them to be like all natural, but most of us had to kind of come across that as we got older. So we're really rooted in the beliefs of standard care and the kind of the belief systems of how disease goes. And when it comes to cancer, I'll tell you, one of the things that I hear more than anything else is it's incurable. In fact, I was reading a book just this week, great book, which I didn't even know that the author of this book was a breast cancer survivor when I read it, but it's the second book I read from her. And there was a theme of breast cancer diagnosis in both of those books. And so I looked into it and found out that she also was a breast cancer survivor. And when she refers to it in the book of this character that has breast cancer, the word she uses is it's incurable, right? Or the doctor said it's incurable. And I hear that a lot. I got this diagnosis and it's incurable. And yet, the person who says that to me typically desperately wants to heal. How do we heal when we hold on to the belief that something is incurable, right? We got these two really strong conflicting beliefs. And then we have to decide, which one are we going to choose? What are we going to go with? And then all the thoughts in between. Some of the things like, well, if I don't believe it's incurable, am I kidding myself? If I think I can do this, is that foolish? I hear people, and people have asked me, aren't you living in denial? But I can look and find evidence of people who've cured themselves from cancer, who've been cured from cancer with all kinds of different approaches, but have ended up having no evidence of disease in their bodies. And so I know that it's possible, right? So even if somebody says it's incurable, I can look and find evidence that that's not true. Yet I still have to work through holding on to what I was so conditioned to believe. It's not curable. It's not fixable. Things can't change. That can't happen. Why do we choose to believe those things that limit us? And I think we have lots of thoughts about maybe I'll look foolish. Maybe I'll be a failure. Maybe I'm being delusional. But why don't we have those same thoughts by believing in the thing that limits us, right? Why is that? Why, if I can look at people who've healed and I've looked at people who haven't healed, why would I believe more in the people who haven't healed and the people who have. Like, think about that. Why do we do that? This was a big part of things over the last 3.5 years, especially when it was stage 2. I at first was very scared, and I definitely had the thoughts because I had memories of my brother dying from cancer, and he had advanced stage 4 when he was diagnosed. But as I learned more about it, I started to realize, well, people don't die from stage 2, right? From stage 2B. We have to go through some horrendous treatments to treat it. But most of the time, people don't die from that, right? We die from stage 4, from metastasis and advanced metastasis. So once that happened to me, I really had to focus on every little shred of belief that I had that said, maybe you're wrong. Maybe this can't happen. And it was just amazing to me. But I really, at one point, realized I can't accomplish what I want to accomplish if if I'm holding on to these conflicting thoughts. I've got to decide. And that doesn't mean that my brain still won't throw up the conflicting thought, but it means I will choose not to believe it. I will choose not to put energy in it. I will decide that I'm going to put thoughts into or energy into only this thought that moves me forward and serves the goal that I have. Right. So I think conflicting thoughts is a really big deal when it comes to anything in your life. Like if you're working on a relationship and you're thinking, I want this really happy, close, connected relationship with my spouse. And then you also have the belief things can't change. This has been the way it is. It's always going to be this way. How do we move past that? Right. So I think it's important to recognize that. I see a lot of this when it comes to health, that people have this vision and this desire and this dream for themselves to have this really healthy body, maybe to have a fit body, maybe to lose some excess body fat. But at the same time, they tell themselves the story, I can't do it. It's never worked for me. It's never changed for me in the past. I've always gone back. And as long as we hold on to that belief, we've got to recognize that it's a ball and chain, right? It's really going to hold us back. So when you're thinking about creating a life that's better than before breast cancer, what conflicting thoughts are you holding on to? And then another thing that I know is super powerful, and I still catch myself doing it all the time. And I know for my clients, I see them do it too. We start to see a positive change and then we push the boundary, right? So I'll give you an example. In the past, when I've had blood work come back and my tumor markers are really low, I'll start to deviate a little bit, right? People do this a lot with weight loss as well. We lose weight and we're like 5, 10 pounds away from that goal. And we're so proud of ourselves because we've already accomplished 5 or 10 pounds of weight loss. And so we'll be like, so I can have one cupcake, right? Because I'm doing good. Okay. I had that cupcake and I didn't really lose any weight. I can have 2 cupcakes next week. And we push the boundaries and we push the boundaries and we test. And when it comes to supporting our metabolic health and living a lifestyle that supports that, I see that a lot. I am totally guilty of it. I did it as recently as the last PET scan when I got this wonderful PET scan result. My tumor markers now since October have been in the normal range, normal looking at the CA15-3 marker, and the normal range is considered to be between 0 and 25. And my tumor markers have been between 0 and, not 0. My tumor markers have been between 18 and 20 since last October. Fantastic, right? So I see myself testing the boundaries. I see myself going, well, I could have that warm, hot flour tortilla at the Mexican restaurant that I love where they're making them fresh in the kitchen. Well, maybe that's got 38 carbs instead of 20, but I'm doing good. I can go past that. When I'm sitting with my husband, like right now as I'm recording this podcast, he came home early. He's taking an extra day off for an extra long 4th of July weekend. And he's sitting out on our patio watching what's going on with the festivities because we live on a marina. So people are taking stuff out to their boats and they're getting ready to go and like totally enjoy the 4th of July weekend. And he's sitting out there with an old fashioned, right? And he's just enjoying the warm day and watching all the activity. And is it tempting? Right. And I'm thinking, well, I could have an old fashioned. I mean, it's 4th of July weekend. Maybe I'll have a couple. And then how do I know when I push the boundary if I've pushed it too far? Well, the only way I know if I've pushed it too far is the next blood test or the next scan that shows cancer is moving forward. Then what? Am I willing to suffer that consequence? Am I willing to push the boundary until my body says, you push too far? We have to think about that. And it's an interesting thing. I don't know why we do it. I don't know why we feel that need to test instead of to say, look, what I did is wonderful. It's working. Let me stay here. I think it's because it's so appetizing to look at whatever it might be, the fun. Like I could go back to what we think of as normal again. I can be like everybody else and have another glass of wine or have a cupcake. And I can go back to living the way it was before anybody ever told me I had cancer. I think that's what our brain wants to gravitate to. And so we've got to be super intentional and conscious about being aware of when we're pushing the boundaries, which is okay sometimes if you want to, but what's the consequence? When will you know that you've pushed too far? What will be the indicator? And are you willing to push far enough for that red flag to pop up? I think that's something that we have to be super aware of. A lot of times, the farther away we get from a cancer diagnosis and treatment, and that's for people who are out of treatment, right? And for those of us living with metastatic disease, the more we see healing, the better we get, the more we think, I can just act whatever your perception of normal is again. And we've always got to be aware that that may come with a consequence, that we're testing the waters, right? And what happens if that water gets too hot? Is that what you want? Do you want to have to undo something? So I think, especially in this last 3.5 years, that's been a really powerful one for me. Sometimes I say to my husband, ooh, I feel like I'm getting cocky. I feel like I'm feeling too confident in my amazing body and its ability to heal, right? And I want to push a boundary. I want to test it. I want to see. But the test is always going to have an outcome. Do I want to risk the outcome? Sometimes I do. I get cocky and I've got to reel myself back in. And I remind myself that all the things that I am celebrating, all the things I get up every morning and write gratitudes for, especially waking up not in pain. For the many, many, many months that I was in horrendous pain from cancer in my bones, I'll tell you what, every morning I wake up and I'm not in pain, I write that gratitude down. How wonderful it is to wake up and not be in pain. Amazing. Yeah. So whenever I'm thinking now about testing the boundaries and whenever I'm thinking about like those conflicting thoughts, right? I'm always coming back to thinking, what would be the cost here? If I don't let go of something that's holding me back, what could potentially be the cost? If I decide to push, if I decide to test the waters, what could be the cost? And I think that that's an important thing to consider. So I just want to throw that out there for you. Like, where do you think you're pushing the boundaries? Where are you telling yourself a story? Because we do this, right? We look for validation that it's okay to push and it's okay to test. And it's not too far yet. And sometimes as I'm working with people on labs, they'll say, well, yeah, I've been eating lots of carbs or I eat lots of sugar, but my HbA1c, which is an indicator of pushing towards prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, and they'll look at it and say, but I'm not there yet. Right. So why is that we have to have sometimes this really devastating news before it scares us enough to take action? And sometimes that doesn't even happen. Right. So really examining your mind and saying, am I living the life I want right now? Is there something I want to create? And if I do, am I holding on to thoughts that are telling me I can't have it? And am I deciding to push if I'm creating it, if I'm finding success in moving forward? Am I going all in and embracing that success and the actions that have gotten me here? Or I'm looking at the actions, or are you looking at the actions that got you there and testing and see, can I cut back on them? Can I put a little less energy into this? How much less energy can I do? You know what I'm talking about, right? We all do it. And so just being aware of it, I think, is very important. Awareness to me is the key to change. The more we're aware and willing to look at what we're doing and not doing, even if we don't create change or change a behavior immediately, the willingness to be aware of it is a huge and powerful step towards creating the life you want. So, quick episode. I just didn't want to let this 4th of July weekend go by. I love 4th of July. I'll tell you, I used to love the fireworks. I still do love watching them from a distance. But about 10 years ago, one of my sons had a horrific fireworks accident. And I am traumatized from that incident. And so handling fireworks has just never been appealing since that day. But I do like to watch them from a distance, and I'm looking forward to it this weekend and celebrating with my husband and with some dear friends that are coming over to celebrate the holiday with us. So I wish for you, if you're living in the United States, you're celebrating the 4th of July, have a safe and happy holiday. And I look so forward to celebrating the rest of this amazing month of survival anniversary with you. And just a reminder, from now through July 11th, my actual diagnosis date, you can get into my 4 Pillars of Breast Cancer Recovery coaching experience for $130 off of the price. It's a great deal. It's a powerful program. And you can find all the details about it on my website, thebreastcancerrecoverycoach.com. Use the code 13 years. Get the discount. You have lifetime access to the program and 16 weeks of getting to have live coaching with me as well. All right, friends, have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.